I've got this effects pedal that I'm going to show you how to build today. Now, it's a really easy build. It requires no power, but it totally could be the missing piece of the puzzle for you. Don't make the same mistake that I did and underestimate this pedal. And for all you more experienced pedal builders out there, when I reveal what it is, don't jump to any conclusions. Just sit back and relax, because these pedals are available out there to buy, but a lot of them have a massive design flaw which really restricts the coolest thing about this pedal. So we're going to fix that today. Now, I hope you saved some of those transformers from that other pedal build that we did a little while ago, because today what we're making is something called an anti-buffer or a pickup simulator. Now, being a Symbiotic pedal, the main thing that makes it awesome, along with a few other things that we're going to get into a bit later on, is how it interacts with other pedals, and primarily fuzz pedals. It pretty much turns fuzz pedals into some of the best sounding overdrives on the planet. It's easier for me to show you, just check out this short clip. If I put the fuzz on, so I know what you're saying, why can't I just use my guitar's volume and roll that back to get access to all those sort of tones? And you can in a perfect world where everything works out, but it doesn't always work out that way. And there are definitely a few advantages to having a pedal like this as opposed to just using your guitar. Firstly, and the most obvious one, is if you're running a buffered bypass pedal first in your chain, like a Boss tuner or any Boss pedal, a Digitech pedal, something in front of this pedal with a buffered bypass. That massively affects the tone of the fuzz, but also completely ruins the interactivity with your guitar and that pedal. The other cool thing about this pedal is it means you can put this fuzz anywhere in your chain. You don't have to have it at the front, so it gives you a lot more versatility about where you want to put it on your board. The biggest thing for me would be tweakability. When you design a pedal like this, you can make it in a way that gives you a lot more access to those fuzz to overdrive tones. You can really open out that sweet spot. You'll probably find when you are doing it on the guitar, the sweet spot is extremely narrow. And this is the biggest problem with a lot of these pedals out there, is that they've designed them like a guitar circuit as opposed to designing them like a pedal. So you want to be able to design it in a way that opens out that sweet spot and gives you all those different shades and tones of fuzz that you can have access to just on the fly with a few controls. Being able to have access to the exact same sound every time is another really important factor. And when you have preset controls on a pedal with a foot switch, it means you have access to the exact same sound every time instead of trying to find it with your volume control. Other cool things, you can use it as a reamping tool if you're into that. You can have it right on the end of your chain on all the time as an analogizer. I'm sure that's a real word. I've seen a lot of guys run them like that just to give it sort of that analog vibe before going back into the ramp, especially if you're running a whole bunch of digital pedals. If you're running active pickups, you can't use a fuzz if you're running active pickups. Well, it just doesn't sound that great. And if you're running wireless gear as well, exact same problem. So it gets rid of a lot of these issues, especially if you're running vintage effects pedals and fuzz pedals that you want to have more natural fuzz tones. Okay, let's get into the parts we need to build this thing. Okay, so let's just go really quickly through the parts that you're going to need today. So you're going to need a 1590B enclosure or whatever similar style enclosure. You're going to need a bit of hookup wire, a couple of jacks. I've got a couple of Switchcraft ones here. A foot switch. So I generally always use a 3-pole double throw switch. The transformer, the one that we use from the Golden Gizmo pedal. This is a great little transformer. You can use it for all sorts of things. A 22 nanofarad capacitor. Now this is the tone capacitor. So you can use whatever tone capacitor that you'd normally use, a 47 nanofarad, whatever. For the tone control, I'm using a 500K audio taper, but for the volume control, and this is the real important thing here, I'm using a 500K C taper, reverse audio taper. Now that is very important. We'll get into that shortly, why that's important, but that is all the parts you're going to need today. Obviously a couple of knobs as well will be cool. Okay, so let's mark up these holes we're going to drill. First, I always tape down the center. It's just a good habit to get into, because if you're using like a Sharpie or something, the ink can actually stain the powder coat, which is a total nightmare to get off. So it's just good to do it for the center line. So I'm talking with a cap in my mouth as usual. Okay, so for these two knobs, let's go down 20 mil from the top, and for the switch, let's go up 20 mils from the bottom. Why not? So now I'm going to measure 18 millimeters either side of the center line. Now we've got our top marked out. If you're using this style of enclosure, a 1590B, you can't often top mount the jacks if you've got pots down this end because there's just not enough space. So you're going to put the jacks 50 mil up from the bottom there. So let's mark that along the edge. And I generally just go up 12 mil. Okay, so next we're going to dot punch these and we're going to drill them out. So we've got 7 millimeters for those pots. They're going to be 7 millimeter size holes. We're going to have a 12 millimeter hole for the switch and 9.5 millimeter hole for the jacks. Start with your smallest hole first. Start with those 7 millimeter holes and then work your way up 9.5s and the 12 millimeter one last. Because if you screw it up and you do 12 millimeter holes for your pots or something like that, there's nothing you can do about that. You're kind of stuck there. But if you start with your smaller ones and if you muck that up, at least you can drill it out to the bigger size. Drill them all out and then we'll load all those components in there. Okay, I've almost got all these parts in this enclosure, but one more little tip I want to share with you guys. When installing jacks, always use one of these. It's an internal tooth locking washer. Let me see if I can get a close up on that. There you go. These are used on the inside of the pedal. If you ever see one on the outside with the nut on, the person has put it on wrong. It goes on the inside like this. What it does, let me just get this on. Get up. And it's sandwiched right in there between the jack and the enclosure. And what it does, when you tighten that up, it stops this jack from spinning, which is nice, but it bites into the jack and it bites into the enclosure. Now, the cool thing about that is it joins up the ground points on these two jacks through the enclosure. So you don't actually have to run a wire between the two ground lugs on those jacks. You can still run a ground wire if you want like an extra backup, but I find these internal tooth lock washers are really, really good at creating a really solid ground connection with the enclosure that doesn't fail. Now, if you're using jacks that are cheaper, then you might want to still put a wire across because these Switchcraft jacks, you can really put quite a lot of torque on them and they can handle being tightened up really, really tight. Anyway, that's a cool little tip for you there. Now the pedal is all done and ready to go. I'll just show you how it's all connected. Now, if you are a member at my Fourth Wheel site, I've got a schematic over there for you. I've also got a parts list. I'm also going to show you how that cool little flip dot circuit works inside that red version of this pedal that I've got. Plus, I'll open up the red pedal and show you through how that one is wired. Okay, so let's go through this enclosure. I wanted it to look a certain way. I'm really happy with how this has been wired up. So firstly, we've got our input jack on this side. Okay, so you've got your hot lug here. This goes from the tip, and I've got a wire coming around to the center lug on this side of the switch. Okay, and this is like a really standard true bypass arrangement. You'd see this a lot of the time, and normally the center row would be for an LED. And you know what? I'd recommend putting an LED in here, maybe making room for a battery. You know, if you're going to be using this live, it's probably going to be a lot easier to work if you've got an LED in there. When it's switched on, these two lugs are connected. We're going down into the primary side of that transformer. That's the side with the P on it. And then I'm using the center tap. So there's three legs on each side of this transformer. We're going to be using the center one. I've cut all those other ones off. Coming out of that center leg, straight into the input side of the volume control. Okay, so also connected to that is the tone control. So they're connected together. Then I've done this little risky move here with the tone capacitor. So the tone capacitor is actually going underneath this jack here, connecting up to this ground lug here. So now this ground lug is connected through that washer through the chassis. I haven't added an extra wire, even though I could if I wanted it to be super safe. Okay, so let's go to the other side now, the return side. So this is our pot here. Now I've put in this particular one a 500k audio pot, so I want to show you the difference between audio and reverse audio. That'll be quite interesting, that comparison. It'll sort of make it obvious why a reverse audio pot is so much better. Right, so the left hand lug here, this goes up to ground. I've still got to solder that one by the looks, so I've got to solder that ground on. Naughty. And then from the center lug here, I've got a wire going up to here on the switch. And then from the center lug here on the switch, we're going out into the hot lug, which is connected to here on the output jack. And then you're just going to connect these two lugs here. Now I'm using a 0 ohm resistor. It's just an easy, tidy way of doing it. It's basically just a piece of wire, really. When you turn the effect off, this contact and this one are connected together. So you can sort of see your input jack comes in here, it goes down, jumps over there, up, and then straight out your output jack. When you turn it on, this lug and this lug are connected, and this one. So you're going to be coming in here, down through that coil of the transformer, and into our guitar circuit, and then back out to here, then into this wire going to the output jack. And that's pretty much it. It's a very, very basic circuit, but it works incredibly well. Firstly, I want to show you the interaction with your guitar and a fuzz. Now, this is the red Gizmo fuzz. Now, it's a fuzz. I have released it on our website if you want to check it out, but I am dying to get a project together with a circuit based on this design. It's pretty much 12 fuzzes in one. It uses a lot of that same green Gizmo principle. It's got a bunch of different fuzzes on a dial, and I'm going to use fuzz 5 today because I really like, it's quite balanced. But you can hear it's really full on, and the whole idea behind the red fuzz is to make, the whole idea behind the red Gizmo fuzz is to make it so it is highly interactive with your guitar. So that's what makes it a great choice for today's test. So you can see when I roll down, just get quick access to a whole bunch of great overdrive sounds. When you have a buffered bypass pedal in front of that, it ruins that interaction that you get between your guitar and the pedal. And you can't always have fuzzes at the front of your chain. It just doesn't work sometimes. So you need something else to make that happen. And that's where pedals like this come in. They are so freaking handy for that. So now let me show you what it's like when you've got a buffer inserted into that chain. Right, so I've got these pedals here switched off. Now I'm running this buffer in the front here, and I'm going to show you how it negatively affects the sound here. So if I put the fuzz on, now it's not a bad sound at all, it's just quite raspy in the top end for me. Now if I roll my guitar's volume back, it cleans up, but it doesn't, for me it does not sound good. Obviously, when the guitar's going directly into it, it sounds completely different. But if you're using a buffer and you've got one of these pedals in the chain, listen to the sound difference just when I turn it on. To be honest, they're actually both quite cool sounds. The magic happens though when you're rolling down, right? So when I roll down a little bit, it's just easy to get. It's so much easier to get access to those low gain sounds. That was almost on nothing, so let me show you. Try there. Probably a little bit too gainy, let's go a little bit lower. You can sort of see the range of gain. Okay, so now we're going to talk a little bit about pot taper. Now you notice that with this one we put in a audio taper pot. I wanted to show you the difference, and this one has a reverse audio taper pot. So I explain the difference between the two types of pots, and then we'll come back and do a quick demo showing you exactly what it sounds like and what the advantages are when you use a reverse audio taper pot. Okay, so we're going to do a quick thing on pot taper. So at this point here, our pot is on 10, and then we're going to be slowly turning down. So if you've got a linear taper pot and you turn it down, it turns down in a perfectly linear straight line like that, which actually doesn't sound as smooth as you think, especially if you're running overdrive and things like that. The go-to for most guitars is an audio taper pot. So that's, as soon as you start rolling down, it rolls down really quickly, and then it sort of slowly evens out before we get to zero. Now, reverse audio is the exact opposite curve of that. It slowly starts to roll down and then quickly tapers off right near the end. I think my drawing is actually improving. This is amazing. So if you want to control this circuit, a reverse audio taper pot is the absolute way to go, because you're going to get the biggest sweet spot. This is the problem with this circuit, is that people are treating it like a guitar where it's actually an effects pedal, and we don't have to treat it like a guitar anymore. And using an audio taper pot with a steep curve like this means that you lose access to that absolute humongous sweet spot there of all those different fuzz tones and shades of fuzz that you could use if you're using a reverse audio taper. So it makes the control over that fuzz to overdrive so much more gradual and easier to dial in exactly what you're after. I have tried a linear taper, which was definitely better, but still a little too fast for my liking. So that is the problem with most of these out there. They're using guitar pot tapers, where really they should be thinking a bit more like they're using an effects pedal and trying to get a taper to open up that sweet spot. As far as the tone control goes, I mean, I'm sticking with an audio taper, but I think a reverse audio would probably work better. But in this particular circuit, the tone control doesn't have a humongous amount of effect anyway. So it's not something you have to worry about too much. Honestly, if I was going to remake this again, I'd probably just put the volume control in. I wouldn't worry about a tone control. But you know, it can be nice if you want to get some darker tones, pushing some octave fuzzes or something like that could be really cool. Right now, I'm going to show you the pot taper difference between using a reverse audio taper pot and a standard audio taper pot. Now, this one we built here, the blue one, the volume pot here is a standard audio taper, and that's what you see a lot in a lot of these units out there. And this one, we're using a reverse audio taper. Now, the reverse audio taper just opens up that sweet spot. I've probably said that a billion times now, but I want to show you kind of what that is like. So, if we turn this one on, and then we just start rolling it down, you can see really quickly that it cleans up super fast. So on half, you might notice that the red one does sound a little different. I have put some mods in there, and they are available for my members on my fourth wall page. So if you're a member, go and check those out. But if I turn that one off, and roll this one down, that's essentially halfway on this control, and this is halfway on this one. You can hear there's such a wider range of tones available using a reverse audio taper pot. It's just so gradual and even from pretty much clean. Like if I go all the way down here, pretty much a clean sound there all the way up. Where you find with this one here, it's just most of the action happens right at the end there. And there's just it's a lot of clean stuff going on down here. So for me, it's just more, this one is just so much more usable. For me, some of the nicest overdrive sounds around, using fuzz pedals as the engine for that overdrive, and using cool pedals like this to get really dialed in, repeatable sounds. You'll find just with having a pedal like this, you can use it in front of all sorts of things. You get so much more mileage out of what you already have. So definitely build this, get this on your board. Like I said, don't underestimate this pedal. The amount of different tones you can get out of what you've already got is massive. So anyway, guys, I hope you really enjoyed that project. Have a great week, and we'll catch you in the next video.